So, Dr. Robert Glover, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
No, it's great to have you. Now, you've written a very famous book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and I think this is a great topic because I've worked with guys, and one of the issues that does come up enormously is the fact that a lot of guys do have this nice guy syndrome. I refer to it as the Prince Charming syndrome as well. Turning up to a date with a bunch of roses and
Yeah,
trying
exactly.
to, that kind of thing. And we're taught this in Disney, I think, from quite an early age. And I think it's almost difficult to escape that once it's in. We're kind of bombarded with it from a very early age. Would you agree that that's the genesis of it is a lot earlier than we think?
Yeah, and I call that nice guy seduction, where the guy thinks, well, no woman would like me just the way I am, so I've got to make a really good impression on her. I've got to do things for her. I got to be nice to her. I got to buy her things. I got to bring her roses. Then maybe she'll think I'm a great guy and want to hang out with me. So yeah, this belief system, in my view, really begins in infancy at a very early age when an immature, dependent child um, who is narcissistic by nature and believes they're the cause of everything that happens to them. They believe, okay, I cause these bad things to happen. Mom's sad, mom's depressed, dad drinks, dad left, mom and dad fight. It must be my fault. And so they internalize this sense of what I call toxic shame, that I'm not okay, there's something wrong with me. So for nice guys, fundamentally, everything we do is trying to be a good enough person so that people will like us and hide anything about us we think might cause somebody to not like us. And as you mentioned, that probably shows up the most in dating and relationship. It doesn't work in career as well. But when we're trying to get the favor of the opposite sex, that's when it really shows up.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking, there's a movie, I think it's The Mask of Jim Carrey, but right at the beginning, it's the very first scene. And he likes this girl at work, his colleague at work, and he's constantly trying it on with her. And he's buying her baseball tickets. And, in the end, she takes the baseball tickets and takes someone else
Of
with
course.
her. And then he says to his friend, he goes, I'm wearing her down. I'll get her eventually. I'm wearing her down. And that for me was the ultimate nice guy. It's just like, if I wear her down enough, maybe she might give me a pity fuck at the end of
Even Jim Carrey in a different movie, Dumb and Dumber,
Mm.
when he has his crush on the woman there, and he asks her at some point, she says, I'm never going to be with you, and he says something like,
Yeah.
please, just one in a million chance that we could be together.
Mm.
And she says, okay, there's
Yeah.
one in a million chance. And he goes, yes.
Yeah. 1 in a million. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that
great.
I can work those odds.
Yeah, I can work those odds. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned toxic shame, and that was actually something I wanted to. I didn't want to sort of brush past that because I think that's an absolutely brilliant part of your book there. Um, that toxic shame, as you say, comes in infancy. Now, it's almost as if the child feels that pain for the first time as well, because it's very painful to feel that abandonment. I can imagine for a child, everything's very overly sensitive. It's these little these bundles of joy, they come into the world, but when they feel that first pain, it must be absolutely traumatic for that child. And where does that child go if it doesn't want to sit in its nervous system? It must have to create coping mechanisms. I know when I was a child, what I did to come out of my body because it was so painful is I went up into my head and I started to you know overly analyze everything, because that was almost like a recluse from being in the pain of the body. And the work that I've been doing over the last few years is to sort of like learn how to come back from the head back into the body again. Some would
Yeah.
refer to that as the hero's journey, the kind of the re-embodiment process. But you talk about this brilliantly in the book, and the way that you write is very accessible and it's very easy to read, and you can grab it very quickly. With the toxic shame, as you say, could you elaborate on that? The child, in that moment, I think you talk about it, is the developing of the ego, in terms of the child feels like it's the center of the universe. Therefore, any abandonment or any punishment, they must, in that moment, assume that it's their fault, and that's the sort of the development of the ego. Is that correct? Could you elaborate on that
Yeah,
anymore?
you've spelled that out pretty well. I remember I started writing No More Mr. Nice Guy. I'm a recovering nice guy, and I started writing the book in my second marriage about 25 plus years ago. And I remember my then wife was reading like a lot of John Bradshaw, The Shame That Binds Us, and he's written 2 or 3 books on shame. And I remember she was reading me some excerpts from one of his books. I think we were lying in bed one night. She's reading. She goes, "This sounds just like you." And she reads this stuff about shame. And I'm a relatively intelligent guy. I already had a PhD in marriage and family therapy at that point, and it's like I grasp most concepts pretty well. And you say I think I'm pretty good at then communicating them in understandable ways. And I tell you what, she was reading shame. It's like I didn't get it. It was like a foreign language. It didn't make sense to me. And I thought, if anything, that sounds like you. You're the one that kind of hates yourself. I don't think I hate myself. And it took me a while to really not only intellectually grasp toxic shame, but to emotionally understand it at the core of who I am as well, and how I've managed that all my life. And what I realized I've done, and nice guys tend to come in 2 categories in this regard. And in No More Mr. Nice Guy, I refer to them as the I'm so good nice guy and the I'm so bad nice guy. And the I'm so good nice guy was like me, in that we've compartmentalized our shame. It's tucked away in this airtight container somewhere in our psyche. And we think, I'm a great guy. Why wouldn't everybody like me? Or as I say in the book, a lot of nice guys think, well, any woman lucky to have me, but I don't know why they would want me. So there's the paradox there. The shame is still in there, but we're just not real consciously aware of it. We're compensating by doing all these nice things and using our covert conscience and trying to get people to like us. Whereas what I call the I'm so bad nice guy, this is a guy that actually dwells on all of his flaws, all of his insecurities, all of his mistakes, all of his, everything negative about himself. It just permeates his thinking. And like the I'm so good nice guy, he still believes, well, I got to get everybody to like me. I got to treat people well and be a nice guy and do things for people. And he believes that's the only way anybody can like him, but lives in a constant fear that he's going to be found out at any given time. And you're right, this comes from an early life experiences. And I remember studying child development in graduate school, and the number one takeaway of everything I learned about child development is that a child's number one fear is abandonment, because for a child, abandonment is death. We human animals are like the most dependent offspring on the planet. It takes us about 18 years to be able to really take care of ourselves. For most animals in the animal kingdom, the parents just don't have the resources to take care of their offspring for 18 years. And so we are very dependent. And that means if something were to happen to us and we're terrified of this abandonment, because it means death, it means we can't take care of ourselves. We can't feed ourselves. We can't protect ourselves. We can't even change our own clothes at a very early age. So that's emotionally wired into every human being. And as you indicated, what every human being does when they experience the pain of any form of abandonment, this doesn't mean your parents threw you out on the street and left you. You're hungry and you don't get fed. You're messing your diaper and you don't get changed. You have a stomach ache and you don't get held. Parents fighting around you, you pick up that anxiety state. It's contagious. Whatever it is, as you said, children are just a ball of feelings. We just feel. We don't think. We don't analyze. We don't rationalize. But from that feeling emotional state, and by the way, all that gets stored up in a very primitive part of our brain called the amygdala, where it doesn't store words, it doesn't store picture memory, it just stores emotional state. And from that very immature place with a very immature, underdeveloped brain, we do develop survival mechanisms. And usually, well, most every human being develops at least 2. One of them is trying to cope with the feelings that we're feeling in that moment. You mentioned going into your head. Often men split. We either go into our head or go down into our genitals. But we might cry. I sucked my thumb till I was in kindergarten. So I think that was probably some kind of coping mechanism, self-soothing. Some babies eat. Some babies become no problem at all. They just disappear. But you're not thinking this out because we don't actually have the thinking capability. It's almost a reflexive way of managing discomfort in the moment. The second thing that we do is still a very primitive animal thing to do, is we try to prevent these painful experiences from happening to us again. And all animals do this. I mean, you kick a dog enough times, it'll shy away. It'll get gun shy. I mean, if you give a dog a shock enough times, if it pushes a lever to get food, it'll starve to death. It'll quit pushing the lever. That's the escaping of that emotional pain. We all do this. Now, here's the thing: those survival mechanisms, as I get again stated, they're stored up in an emotional part of our brain. They are our emotional operating system, and that part of our brain is wired into every other part of our brain, which means that emotional machine language operating system controls every app that's running on top of it, just like our smartphones and our computers. But we don't know that it's there. Therefore, it controls every perception we have, every experience we have, and it controls those two survival mechanisms. You know, get rid of the pain right now and prevent it from happening again. And we don't realize as adults, everything we do is centered around those two things. They just look a little more adult-like when we get to be adults, but we're still just doing the same thing, whether it's with alcohol, with porn, with food, with codependency, with gambling, with work, with money, with addiction, with chocolate, with Sex in the City, whatever it is we're trying to escape. But we don't know that's what we're doing. And so this work that you're talking about, when it lets us get down to that core emotional stuff, and maybe we won't ever clear it out. I do think we can rewrite on top of that operating system that helps us reshape the way we show up in the world.
Yeah, and this is the basis. I mean, this is what I really loved about your book, was when you went into all this stuff and you kind of laid it out, how that is how the nice guy formed in order to try and keep himself safe from that pain, from that abandonment. And you mentioned there about like the blanket or the thumb or something like that.
My thumb was in my mouth. I always had the blanket. I always had that soft, smooth part of the blanket.
Yeah, it's funny because I had, I think you call them pacifiers in America. We call them dummies. And I actually had dummies till I was about 7 or 8 years old. And
binkies, they call them now. Yeah, binkies, dummies.
And it was like my secret as a kid. It's like I still had my dummies in bed, you know, because to me, they were like pacifying that anxiety. They were the thing that was sort of keeping me balanced, if you like. And I remember when they were taken away from me, I couldn't sleep. I was like, you know, in bits, because it almost reawakened that feeling of abandonment again, you know, in a way. And I felt very disjointed, very like fragmented. I kind of felt a bit all over the place. And as you say, you know, we don't, for a lot of, when we move into adulthood, we don't lose that, that kind of vice. We just translate it, we transfer it to cigarettes, to alcohol, to ice cream, Sex in the City, but we're unaware of that root cause, which is that schism, that kind of that pain that comes in as a child, and that coping mechanism we create in that moment.
That's all tied into that toxic shame, that there must be something wrong with me. And it's not even that I do bad things. It is, I am bad. I'm defective. I'm flawed. I'm not good enough.
I mean, I've had that. I remember when I was sort of in my room crying my eyes out as a kid. I remember saying to myself, "I'm just so terrible. You know, no one loves me." You know, it was almost like I had to create this narrative to almost bottom out through the pain.
And I was the other way. I'm so good. How come I'm always getting in trouble? I don't do bad things.
and there's what created the two types.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess as men are here, well, and for women as well, because I guess they have they go through the same thing in their own way. Our journey is to go back into that pain, right? So,
well, you mentioned the hero's journey, and I like that reference, because I've actually been working with a friend of mine who's started out to write a workbook based on No More Mr. Nice Guy. And once he started writing, I said, man, you need to just own this and write a full-blown book. And it's actually going to be out in the next few months. But he's titled it No More Mr. Nice Guy, A Hero's Journey, because it is talking about that journey. And I wrote a foreword for it. And the main thrust of the foreword was that recovery from nice guy syndrome, as I identify it, is not about becoming a different person or a better person. it's about rediscovering ourselves. It's about taking that journey of the hero's journey with, many perils and many learning experiences, and coming to find out who we were all along, and discovering that we're just perfectly fine
Mm.
just as we are.
Yeah.
So it's not about getting better. It's not about, becoming different. It's about loving ourselves as we are more completely.
Yeah, and I talk about the hero's journey because it's very similar to these monomyths that you see in, like, Star Wars or the
Oh, of
Hobbit,
course.
this kind of thing. And in those journeys, you see like a herald come along and convince the protagonist to go on this journey, and often he doesn't want to take the journey. He's like, no, I'm comfortable in the village or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
then he gets convinced to go on this journey, and then often there's a bridge involved, and a lot of these movies the bridge collapses, which represents the beyond the point of no return. And then they somehow face like a dragon, or they go into the belly of the whale, Pinocchio, or that kind of thing. And that for me represents going back into that pain, into that original trauma that you talked about.
Exactly.
And then once you've sort of tangled with that and danced with the devil, that you've done that, you've gone and fought the dragon, then you'll see that in these movies there's some kind of prize that's won. There's some kind of elixir or a boon that they then bring back to the village. And to me, that just refers back to the reintegration of yourself, the re-embodiment by going into that pain and healing it, in effect. I
Yeah.
think so. It's quite powerful for me going on that journey, and I think that the mythology part of it really ties it in nicely, I think.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, all the way, like you say, from Pinocchio to Star Wars to Jason and the Argonauts, or
Yeah,
whoever it is,
yeah,
and there's always this interesting part of that. Like you say, they each get confronted with different challenges, and along the way, and each challenge has to teach them. I mean, they're like life and death. You're going to succeed at meeting this new challenge. You're going to die, and in every case, the hurdle, the struggle that the hero deals with, is they want to use their old coping mechanisms to deal with this problem. Whether it's Luke Skywalker, having to trust the Force. In every case, they've got to learn to trust something different than their old tried and true coping mechanisms. And that's the part where they really always have the breakthrough. It's when they have to trust and believe and let go, and just be with whatever this different state of being is,
mm,
whether it's the Force or whatever we want to call it. That is when we rediscover ourselves and our true power, rather than this, the pseudo things that we've been using since we were little, thinking that this is what will get me love, or this is what will make me famous, or this is what will make people like me. None of that shit really works. And the truth is that the superpower we all have is being ourselves.
yeah.
Is just being ourselves without having to, impress anybody, or have enough money, or be thin enough, or muscular enough, or sexy enough, or have a big enough
Mm,
penis. That
mm.
our superpower is by being our authentic self.
Okay, that's a really good place to go into, I think. So that authentic self, because when you hear this expression, just be yourself, I often think that can be almost like the best and the worst advice to give someone.
Oh yeah, it typically is.
Yeah, but I would like to ask, how do you know once you've become the authentic self? How would you know within yourself that you've reached that place where you feel like this is the real me? There's no veneer, there's no kind of window dressing of anything, like to keep you safe. How are you showing up? What sort of things are you exuding? How would you know within yourself, do you think?
Yeah, and that's a good question. It's an excellent question, and maybe this journey never actually ends. Maybe that place of returning and rediscovering ourselves for the first time is an ongoing loop. It is for me anyway. I'm 64, and I've been doing this like for 25 to 30 years, and I keep rediscovering me.
Mm.
Um,
Well, it's like
and
spirals as well, isn't it? They often talk about spiral dynamics. If you notice, a spiral always comes back round to the same place, but
yeah,
it does always get slightly wider and wider. So you're developing and developing, but you still always come back to what you think's the same point. I kind of like
and
that metaphor.
we keep rediscovering ourselves as if the first time we've discovered it, but we've been rediscovering it many times over and over again. um, so that process, and you ask, well, how do you know that, or how do you know when you found the real you? And you're right. Um, when I learned to date in my late 40s, after having been married 25 years, and then, you know, got good enough at it that actually started teaching other people to do it. And that's how most dating gurus become dating gurus. They're not good at it, so they go learn and they go, oh, I can teach this. So you're right. And my second book is called Dating Essentials for Men. And the main core of it is the best way, rather than trying to get women to like you, is much more powerful to authentically attract them by being your true self. And you're right. When guys hear that, usually, oh, just be yourself with women. Guys will usually say something like, yeah, that hasn't worked out so well. I'm myself, and, you know, I can't get laid. And but what I usually say to guys is, when was the last time you let a woman actually see the real you? I said, do you even know who the real you is? I said, because going back to what you and I have been talking about, we have all these mechanisms we've been using since infants. Well, I got to do this to be liked, or I have to hide this from people to avoid being disliked. I mean, how many people know the real us? Do we know the real us? And so I would say, you know, being your authentic self is when you don't have to pretend. You don't have to tell any lies. You don't have to make an impression on anybody. You're comfortable in your own skin. You live life on your terms. You get up and do it your way. And that means we usually have to go through, you know, again, this hero's journey of, like, you know, parents and family telling us, you can't do it that way. You should be doing it this way. Or, you know, women in our life saying, you can't be that. You need to be this. Or the school system, or the religious system, or television, or the internet, or porn, all saying, you got to be this way, you got to be this way. And when you are comfortable in your skin, walking the planet on your terms, you actually become amazingly attractive. And then at that point, I've taken a term from David Data, who wrote The Way of the Superior Man. And I heard him say more than once, he said, choose a woman who chooses you. And the beauty is, most guys go out trying to get a woman to like them. And so that means you got to impress them, which means the woman's in the one-up position. She's the alpha. She's the decider. You're in the one-down position because you're trying to get her to like you. What if you didn't give a fuck and you were just living life on your terms and noticing all the open doors of feminine opportunity around you? Feminine opportunity of adventure, of money, of women, of opportunity, of dogs and cats, and everything that, you know, that's not nailed down is drawn to you magnetically. There's a polarity. And I really do believe this, because I see it in my life. Because I used to be that guy who thought, oh, I've got to, you know, be this to get women to like me, and hide this so they don't reject me. So, for example, I thought, well, I got to hide my sexual intention from them, because women think men who want sex are bad, and they'll reject me if they think I'm talking to them because they have boobs. Well, they know why we're talking to them. They know they have boobs, and they know that's why we men talk to them. But I had this belief system, for example, well, if I can hide my sexual agenda and be different from those other bad men I heard women complain about, well, then maybe she'll want to get naked with me. Kind of like, that was kind of screwy logic, but that's how I operated for most of my life. And when I just really realized, me being a sexual being is a big part of who I am. I'm just me, and I quit trying to hide it, quit trying to repress it, just and quit trying to make anything happen. Just getting up, having a good life every single day of my life. I had no problem getting dates. I had no problem getting laid. I had no problem women wanting to be with me. And you know, everywhere I go, dogs come and they're friendly to me and lie down on my feet. I'm thinking, it's just, there's something energetically attractive about a man who's comfortable in his own skin.
And you said it's, you know, going for what they want. So I think even just the power of saying "I want" is extremely powerful. You know, the I should, I need is very weak.
Yeah,
But, you know, I want. I think there's something very powerful about that. You know, even just saying that to a woman, "I want you," you know, is very sexy. And it's, you know,
and I agree, because nice guys, you know, we think we're bad for having wants or needs. We got to hide those from everybody. I got to give to everybody else, and then maybe. And we're terrible receivers. So yeah, living life on your terms. One of the ways I put it is consciously live in your sweet spots. Where are you the happiest? Where are you the most energized? Where are you the most alive? For me, I found out, I'm talking to you from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. First time I came down to Mexico, I just like, I like it here.
Mm.
And I'd go back home to Seattle, where, probably like a lot of England, is rainy and cold and gray. And I thought, I'm not so happy here. And then every time I'd come back to Mexico, I go, I like it here. And I did that over a period of about 10 or 12 years, just making little trips down here. And I thought, I got to live here. So I've lived here for at least part of the year for about 10 years. And this is my home now. It's my sweet spot.
I like
And my
that.
work is the same way. Everything I do because it energizes me. It fulfills me. It overflows into the world. And again, it is an amazingly attractive energy. So that's how you know when you're living in your sweet spots and your bucket is overflowing and people just like being around you because you're comfortable in your own skin. That's how you know you're at least getting close to finding you.
That's it. I love that. That was so beautifully arranged there in your language, I thought. But it's also one thing that I just jumped out at me there is that it's a radiation. You said it's like it's a rippling out. I think you said it's a radiating out. For me, this is about giving, but not giving to get, as you would say in the book.
Exactly.
This is about giving unconditionally, and I talk about this as well. Giving unconditionally, express yourself unconditionally, and I refer to it like an artist. An artist just expresses themselves. Some people are going to like the art of their work, other people are not. But it's not up to you to control whether they like you or not, and that's the fundamental of a great artist. If Van Gogh was making art to suit everyone, he wouldn't have been a genius, and no one would have liked it. Because he would have been trying to engineer this work to fit in. So I really like the idea of giving. And I think you also talk about, and I really like this as well, you said the word trust, but it's also in your book. I think one of your key terms you said is about surrendering. So it's about letting go. Now that doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean letting, it means letting go, not letting up. I think you say it's not letting up. It's just letting go, be detached from outcome, express, be in your masculine, say what you want to say to this girl, be in your high energy, bioenergy, share it to her like a gift. And if she doesn't want to accept the gift, it's like a ray of sunshine. If someone wants to step in the shade, it's too bad to them, but the sun's going to keep shining.
Yeah, be you, and if they're drawn to it, great. If they're not, great. Now, not everybody likes your podcast series. Not everybody likes my book. Okay, but enough people like your podcast series that you're doing something right, and enough people like my book, I'm doing something right. Not because the proof is in how many people like it, but I suspect you probably get a lot of feedback like I do. I get emails all the time saying, Dr. Glover, thank you. You changed my life. And, that's a pretty big statement to just write an author you've never met and say your book changed my life. And I hear that all the time. And I think my book and the work you do, and there's a lot of great men out there doing a lot of great work because it's authentic, it's real. And it gets people to where they live. And guys go, oh man, I didn't know there's a different way of thinking and viewing the world, and that it was okay to be myself. I thought I had to be this other person in order to be approved of and get my needs met and get laid and make enough money. And I think the internet is a hellhole, cesspool, and it's a fantastic place to communicate. And so I just love that there's so much quality information from men who've been doing their own work on their own hero's journey that are out there helping other men do their journey as well. And man, we need all the help we can
need
get.
it. Well, there's a lot of information out there. I mean, it is a little bit of a minefield because some of it is
a little bit.
Yeah, well, a lot of them. I mean, you could almost write another book saying no more Mr. Bad Boy. I think because there's a lot of the kind of going too much the other way, where it kind of creates this pseudo alpha male type, which is all about knocking a girl's confidence down and
negging her,
negging high status and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so partly of my work was to show the integrated male, which is about not being too much of the feminized qualities of the nice guy, but not also being this hyper masculine type, and both of those are coming from, for me, the little boy.
Yeah, both are pseudo selves. They're not the real self. Trying to be the macho masculine guy is still a pseudo self, and trying to be the more I'll be nice and not offend anybody. That's not who we really are. I mean, I've got a side to me that I can be pretty perceptive, and out of that perceptive place, I can be really effective in teaching and helping people therapeutically. And out of that same perceptive place, I can be a real asshole and really just kind of stick the blade in someone's side and give it a turn, right? Both of those are part of me. And if I try to hide one or think, oh, this is good, this is bad, that part that I'm repressing or tucking away or hiding is still going to get manifested. It's just that I won't know it, and it'll probably hurt people in these really subtle, indirect ways that I'm not even aware of. So every part of us, we've got to learn to love and embrace. And whether that's the part of us that can be a real asshole, the part of us that can be just a total lazy ass, the part of us that just wants to think about all these nasty things we want to do. That's part of us. We got to embrace it. And part of that word integration means we weave it into the whole of the fabric of who we are. And the more conscious we are, and the more open-hearted we are, and the more loving we are, all those dark pieces actually just they take on just a beautiful form of art early. Or I think most art probably is got a lot of darkness flowing through it. And that's why people relate to it, because most of us don't have access to that dark energy in ourselves. And that's a piece I've been working on. I'm in a men's program myself that I'm starting the 3rd year of it. And a big piece of what we do is explore dark energy so that we can integrate it into the whole. And it makes us more powerful, and it makes us more attractive. Trying to be an asshole jerk bad guy to turn women on. But when we actually embrace our own inner asshole, that dick that does dwell within us, and we can embrace it and just authentically be ourselves, it's amazingly attractive to the feminine.
Yeah, because then you'll naturally fluctuate between those two different states, and it's not coming from a place of control or as an act. It's just that part of you that's just wanting to show itself in that moment,
and it's powerful, and it can scare us. A story I sometimes tell. My wife is Mexican, and I remember when she and I first met, and we've been married about 3.5 years. When we first met, I got to know her because she was a massage therapist, and I got massages from her, and I liked her energy. She was upbeat and friendly. She didn't speak English. I spoke a little tiny bit of Spanish. But she was friendly to me, so I asked her out. And our relationship for the first year was she just came over to my condo once a week and we had sex. That's all that it was. But we both really enjoyed that. And then later on, at some point, she said, I like you. And that scared me. I wasn't ready for that. That was about a year after knowing her. And after a while, I realized I like her too. Now we're married. But I remember fairly early on, like I said, my Spanish wasn't great. But I was working at it. We'd both have our phones out with the apps on them anytime we tried to have a conversation. That's why having sex was pretty easy. We didn't have to talk a lot. But I remember one time we're having sex, and it was pretty hot and heavy. And I referred to her in Spanish. I said, "Tú eres mi puta mexicana." And I don't know if you know any Spanish, but that just means you're my Mexican whore. As soon as I said it, I thought, that might not land well. Here I am, an American with this Mexican woman. Is that going to come across as in many different ways? And it turned her on. And she told me after the fact, and I still call her that to this day, among other things. And she says, that's my favorite nickname. I'm your puta mexicana. I'm your Mexican whore. And okay, so that came out of the dark side of me. And if I had that repressed because I thought it would be offensive or might be bad, it would never have just flowed out in that particular moment where it was completely appropriate and completely well received, and it even amped up the connection between us. So by going into our own darkness, it's just part of who we are. It's part of the hero's journey, is finding out where our killer is, where our rapist is, where our pillager is, where that part of us that's part of, the masculine archetype and the part of our evolutionary heritage. Where is that? Because if we don't know where it is, it's going to come out in some not so nice ways.
Yeah. I mean, I like that when you say it has to flow out. And I'm sure women can tell when a guy's, well, they do. They know when a guy's filtering certain words out and behaviors to keep himself safe again, and only getting this sort of half guy come out. I mean, that's not attractive, is it?
No, they just, they're either going to be attracted to us as we are, or they're not. And my belief is, going back to that David Data thing, I'd rather choose a woman who chooses me. And once I discovered that, dating got a lot easier, because I wasn't trying to get women to like me. I've not tried to get a woman to like me since my second wife 30 something years ago. And I've not tried to get a woman with me since my second wife, and she and I have been divorced 20 years. So since that time, and I've had no shortage of women liking me and wanting to have sex with me, but I haven't had to try. So I've just had to be me and challenge my self-limiting beliefs that said, well, women don't like this or women don't want that, and walk through the open doors of opportunity that are everywhere. They're around, but usually we don't see them because we're so focused on, well, I want that woman to like me. I got to figure out how to get her to like me, and that's just a fool's errand. That's not going to take us where we want to go.
Yeah, trying to control these interactions. It's like, you know, the guys are trying to get it right, and you say that in the book as well. You know, they're trying to get it right. They're trying to get the interaction right. Whereas what they should be doing is just be real. Be real rather than trying to get it right. I think that is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah, I read a book. Actually started listening to a podcast several years ago when I was redeveloping my websites. This has been about 7, 8, 10 years ago. I don't know. A guy named Scott Stratton who wrote a book and did a podcast called Unmarketing. And basically he wrote about having a conversation with, you know, the people that come to your podcast, your website, whatever, your blog. And he has a line in that book that really struck me. And he said, when you are being your authentic self, you have no competition. Now he was talking to guys, people in business. You know, all right, if you're just yourself in your blog, there's no one else like you. In your podcast, if you're just you, there's no one else like you. In your website, in your business, in what you're offering the world. So when you're being your authentic self, you have no competition. And I've been teaching that to men in all contexts, whether it be dating, relationship, work, career, entrepreneur, whatever. We got to let go of this thing of thinking we got to be like somebody else, be somebody else. Be your authentic self, because there's no one else like you. Therefore, you have no competition. You will stand out from the crowd in one way or another.
Yeah. I also do think that we are, I know you talk about, I think you mentioned the word chameleon in the book, but I do also believe at the same time, we are also social chameleons. It's almost like a kind of a slight yin and yang going on, whereby we're ourselves and we're individuated. We kind of have our own style. At the same time, we are one type of John with my grandma, as I am with my best mate down the pub, as I am with my girlfriend, as I am with my boss at work, type thing. You know, we're all this, I'm the same person, but at the same time, there are slightly different interfaces that we have with these different people. And that still doesn't mean I'm like molding myself to these people. It just means I'm bringing out a different facet of myself for these people. That makes sense.
I like that.
And that's okay as well. I wanted to just ask what your opinion on that was, because sometimes we forget. It's like, you know, for instance, my natural thing is I swear a lot. You know, that's my honest thing. You know what I mean? But like, if I'm doing if I'm in church and I have to read a memoriam or whatever it is, you know, I'm not going to swear, and that doesn't mean that I'm being inauthentic. It just means I'm also I have emotional intelligence to know what part of myself to bring out at certain times. And I think it's important for guys to realize that's okay as well. As long as you're not losing yourself, dissolving and evaporating your authentic self, as long as you know that you can adjust yourself at certain times, that's okay as well. I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Well, yeah, I like that idea. And maybe you mentioned the chameleon, and I do mention that in No More Mr. Nice Guy, because for the nice guy, the chameleon is more like, you know, you lick your finger and hold it up and see which way the wind's blowing. And I got to be like that. So a difference might be politically, you know, in your country, the whole Brexit thing has been going on for a long time. And in my country, the whole thing with Trumpism and all of that. And so being a chameleon, you know, for you might be if you're around your Brexit, you know, buddies that are pro Brexit, you know, Boris, what's his name? He, you know, okay, then you're kind of pro Brexit, everything. But then when you're with the, you know, the other side, your other buddies like that, now you're like saying, you know, here it might be like you're with your Trump buddies, or in America, you know, you're kind of all the trope, you know, making America great again. Yeah. But when you're with your Bernie Sanders buddies, you're like, yeah, Medicare for all. You know,
Yeah, exactly.
that would be a fucking lie, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a chameleon that there is no real you.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that a person with social intelligence and you know, actually one of the things I say in my Dating Essentials for Men book is I'm not really teaching men to date. I'm using their desire to learn how to date, how to attract women and have love and sex and relationship. I'm using their desire to expand their emotional and social intelligence. Probably over half of that book is not about dating. It's about self-limiting beliefs. It's emotional intelligence. It's how to interact with people. How you know, how to be authentic, like we're talking about. And so being authentic can take different forms without you being like, you know, with Trump buddies, you're Trump. With Bernie buddies, you're like Bernie. It's nothing like that. Interviewing with you, I swear quite a bit as well. But like interviewing you, there'll be a tone that we'll both kind of fit into.
Yeah.
Interviewing with somebody totally different might have a completely different tone.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It doesn't mean we're being
That's all right.
false. There's just a different energetic state to it.
Being co-created between us. And I think the key for me was a word that you mentioned a lot in the book, and I think it already comes down to this: integrity. That's what it comes down to.
Sure.
If you're abdicating your integrity, that's when you're not being the authentic self. It's okay to adapt yourself to certain people and co-create different styles and flavors with different people, as long as you're not losing your integrity in any moment. I think that for me is the you know, how you'd reconcile that.
Well, and I like that. So let's kind of go even a little bit further into the integrity thing, because I think that's core. Because you asked earlier, you know, how do we know if we're being authentic? One of the first things I started working on before I even called this nice guy syndrome, but I just knew I knew I needed to work on some shit. Mainly because my wife told me, I'm going to divorce you if you don't go work on some shit. And she said, I can't take your passive aggressiveness. Well, I thought, oh, I'm a nice guy. You're the one that's unhappy and angry and bitter all the time. I'm a good guy. So I went to therapy to kind of learn why being a nice guy didn't make my wife appreciate me and treat me better and want to have sex with me. And luckily, I started learning really good stuff right away. You know, one therapist, first session, taught me about boundaries. I'd never even heard of boundaries. And I was in my 30s in my second marriage with a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I never heard of boundaries. But probably the very best thing that happened to me is the first resource I went and sought out, because my wife said, you're a sex addict. So you need to go to 12 steps. So I actually went to a 12-step program for sex addicts. I loved it. I quickly found out I wasn't a sex addict. I wasn't having enough sex to be a sex addict, but it was all men and these guys all had some pretty heavy duty shit going on in their lives. And I went there, and for the first time in my life, I grew up in a fundamental Christian church. I had 2 degrees in religion. I was a minister for 8 years. And all of that taught me hide everything. Hide everything. Don't let people see the real you. I was fired from my first minister job because I was teaching some things that I believed. And the people in the church said, no, you can't teach our kids that. That's wrong. And I got fired. So I quickly learned, don't do anything that will rock the boat. So I started going to this 12-step program. I was done being a minister by the time I was at this stage of life. And for the first time in my life, I just started revealing everything about me. Everything I never wanted to tell anybody about, everything I'd ever hidden, every impulse, every fear. And it was like this group met like at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not that much of a morning person, but I got excited every week to go to this group because for the first time in my life, I was just putting everything out there. And, and because probably everybody else in the meeting was looking at me going, why are you even here? We have real problems, you just have, mild problems, but they said, thank you for sharing, Robert, and it was like, I was accepted and I wasn't rejected. And so I made a very conscious decision to focus on becoming an honest person, of telling the truth, of not holding anything back. And I quickly realized, even though I thought I was honest, I I shaded the truth in every context if I thought I might get a negative reaction from anybody. So I really started with my then wife. That, and I even just told her, okay, that's my commitment to you, is tell you the whole truth, do not hold anything back from you, nothing hidden, nothing secret. So like if she'd call me up at work and say, what time are you gonna be home for dinner? And I think, oh, okay, she wants me home right now, but I still got some more work to do. But I didn't want her to be upset. So I say, okay, 5 o'clock, even though I knew I wouldn't be done working by 5. And it was like about 15-minute drive. But I'd tell her that because I didn't want her to be upset. I thought, oh, I just told her a lie. I'm not going to be done working at 5. So then when I'm driving home, I'm stressed and I'm anxious, making up stories to tell her why, I'm getting home actually, at 6 instead of 5. And so what I started doing is that when I'd walk in the door, I'd tell her, okay, I need to tell you something. I was going to tell you a lie. I was going to tell you the traffic was terrible, blah, blah, blah. That's why I'm late. But here's the truth. The truth is, when you asked what time I'm going to be home, I lied to you then. I knew I would not be done by 5, but I didn't want you to be upset at me. So I told you 5. And then, I was stressed about it. Then I made up a story I was going to tell you. So the truth is, I just didn't tell you the truth up front. And she goes, I just wanted to know what time you'd be home so I know when to start dinner. And like, yeah, okay. So I really made that like my number one priority. One of my personal mantras is nothing hidden, nothing half-assed. So if I catch myself like running up a little bit of a story or scenario of how to present or make a good impression or avoid somebody being upset, man, I bring it back home and say, what's the truth? The truth doesn't need rehearsing. The truth doesn't need garnishment. Just tell the truth. And that's been liberating for me. And in that
Mm,
telling the truth, there then is nothing for you that you ever have to hide. So that means you get to be your authentic self, the one that makes mistakes, the one that,
mm.
does dumbass things every now and then, the one that, says yes when you should have said no and you need to come back and own it. That authentic you is a hell of a lot easier to be around and a lot more attractive.
Amen to that, brother. Are there any sort of, I don't want to use the word rules, but
I
is
love
there
rules.
yeah, is there anything that you do, a kind of codes of conduct, etiquette rules, when you're with women or when you're with your partner? Because I also want to be leading this. I also want to be in my masculine polarity and her to be in her feminine polarity. I don't want to be have her in the role of being in her masculine, which is her boundaries, to protect me all the time, to look after me. Is there anything that you do say, well, that is my truth right now, but at the same time, I don't want to shape a scenario whereby we fall out, or she breeds resentment for me, or stuff like that? Is there anything? Do you see what I mean? Is
Well,
there?
yeah, I have a couple thoughts about it. So let me kind of come at it in a couple ways, and maybe one of them will get close to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
One piece is, and I'll come back to the masculine leadership and the polarity part, but like, my commitment to my wife is to tell her the truth, to have no secrets from her. And for example, she's a typical woman in that she's been lied to, deceived, and cheated on, by pretty much every man she's ever been with in her life. So like most women, they expect that's the norm. Men will lie to you, cheat on you, whatever. And so I've told her, from day one, I will tell you the truth. And that's been a really, because I know the first time she catches me in a lie. We've been together over 5 years, and she hasn't caught me in a lie yet. Now, not because I'm a good liar. Unfortunately, I can be, but I don't like that place. It's so much better that if she's upset about something or she thinks she's, caught me in something, it is so liberating to know I got nothing hidden from her. I got no secrets. I don't even have any women on Facebook. I got message anybody. I don't flirt with anybody. I got no secrets. If I get a message from my accountant that says I owe the IRS X amount of money and I'm stressed, I tell her I'm stressed. I don't hide anything from her. And that way, if she does, have a suspicious thing about her, man, I'm a open book. It's a clean slate. Now, with that said, there are times where I know, like everybody in a relationship, you go into pattern and you start resenting something about them or not liking them, or they get on your nerves about something. That's normal. That happens. All right. Trying to do exclusive, monogamous, pair bonded, lifelong relationships is not normal. It's not natural. It's not part of our human DNA. But we keep being told that's what we're supposed to be doing, and we're supposed to succeed at it. The reason why most relationships don't work out is that they're not meant to, they're not normal. But we can learn a lot and grow a lot. Now, so when I'm feeling kind of edgy or, she's on my nerves or I want a little space, I have learned to do two things. One is create some space and tell her, I need to just go have a little alone time. And she's really respectful of that. Sometimes that means, my travel allows me to do that at times. But the other thing I'll usually do is I'll contact a buddy of mine. And I'm in a men's program. So I got at least 20, 25 guys I can call up and they know me well enough. They can say, hey, I'm feeling agitated. I'm just wanting to get the hell out of here. Or she's really bugging me. And I can just tell it to my buddies. And, they listen and maybe give me a little feedback or give me a little suggestion or say, how you doing? How are you taking? So one thing that I'll do is before I dump that on her, right, which the feminine doesn't recover from those dumpings very well. They forever and it cuts to their soul. I'll go tell my buddy. I'll just say, she's fucking driving me crazy, blah, 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 blah. And by the time I get in talking to my buddies, I always feel better. And then if there's something I need to go do with my wife, like just tell her, hey, I just need a little space. I need a little alone time, or this has been bothering me and I just need to tell you it's bothering me. It's not loaded anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that I to stay on and transparent with her. It's not that I just puke everything that bothers me at her. I always go process it with my guys first. Okay. The second thing about the masculine feminine polarity, kind of the way I break this down simply, and it's oversimplifying, is that the masculine does. The masculine penetrates. The feminine is done too. The feminine is penetrated. Now, it's a very simplistic yin and yang model, and we all have a masculine and feminine side. Most straight women tend to be more feminine than masculine. They've all learned to be masculine because they've all been told, you have to have a career, you have to have an education, you have to be a breadwinner, all masculine behaviors. And most straight men are more masculine than feminine, even though we've been told you need to get in touch with your feminine side. You need to, a lot of these nice guy behaviors. But I'm attracted to women that do have a pretty strong masculine side. My wife, man, I won't pick a fight with her. She can beat the shit out of me. She squats the same amount that I do. She's a gym rat. She works out every day. She's done Muay Thai. She knows martial arts. She grew up 8 out of 10 kids in a fucking Mexican ghetto with an alcoholic father. She's a tough cookie. And she can get shit done like nobody's business. I tell her she's my mafiosa. If we need something done around the house, she's on it. If the cars need fixed, she's on it because she can negotiate shit like nobody's business. And because I'm an American down here in Mexico, I get gouged when anybody gives me a price quote. She goes and takes care of it. But she's also very feminine. She likes it when I lead. She tells me that. I like it when you lead. She'll say, I love it when you tell me no. She had surgery a week or so ago. She keeps saying, well, I can drive to go pick up the kids. I go, no, you're not going to drive. We went to Costco today and we're carrying some stuff. And I go out and she's got some heavy things in her hands. I said, you put them down right now. She likes that I will set that tone because it's out of concern and love and open-heartedness for her. So here's what I've found is that most of us guys, we're gonna bump into women that do have a fairly strong masculine side. They're competent. They can get things done. And they often can be the strongest person in the room. But that doesn't mean they want to be, especially in an intimate relationship. They want the polarity of being done to, of being penetrated. But my model is if the default masculine character, and this is usually the guy, will from the beginning set the tone and lead, set that energetic tone. It's not about control. It's not about being domineering unless the domineering submissive is part of just the polarity. It's just about showing up with a plan. And what I found, if the man will treat that as his default role, he's the lead on the dance floor. Somebody's got to lead. And so if he's the default lead and the woman is comfortable being in that follow position, you don't stay that way all the time. There's often a shifting, and maybe sex is the best way to illustrate it. That the man might be initiating and coming on strong with his woman and penetrating her, and then maybe all she pushes him off, and and she climbs on top of him, and now she's in charge. And she can do that knowing that that's okay, to take that masculine role and be the doer, knowing that he's after a little bit going to throw her back
Flip it
down
back around, yeah.
and flip it back around and do her.
Mm.
And that's true in all aspects of the relationship, not just sexual. But the problem with nice guys is because we never, ever get into that leadership role of setting the tone and leading. We never get in that dominant place. They never get a chance to go be in that submissive, be done to place.
Mm.
And because most women, because the nature of the feminine energetically is to be done to, the being done to doesn't always feel good. I mean, that's the whole hashtag Me Too movement. It's women saying, I've been done too, and it wasn't a good thing. And that's why I said women, since throughout evolutionary history, have been security-seeking creatures, because they've always felt vulnerable of being done to. So a person who's been done to since they were a little girl will learn to take control and dominate in a situation, because it feels too vulnerable to not do otherwise, because they've never been able to depend on a man, whether it's daddy, their first boyfriends, their husband, the men. They've never been able to depend on the man to show up open-heartedly, embodied, trustworthy, setting a tone and leading from a place of love. And so they've got to experience it before they can, just melt into their own feminine and accept it and be done too. An example I'll give is that when I was dating, in my dating heyday, if I dated a woman, if I went on 3 or 4 or 5 dates with her, and it looked like we might keep seeing each other, I started doing something where I would tell the woman, I'd say, okay, we need to talk. I said, if we keep seeing each other, here's what you can expect from me. I'd tell them, I'll be conscious. I'll pay attention to you, to me, to us, what's going on here. I will be honest. Everything I will tell you will be the truth, the whole truth. You won't ever find out I didn't tell you the truth. I'll be transparent. I'll tell you what I think, what I feel, what I want, where I'm going, what I expect of you. And 4, I said, I will set the tone and take the lead. I will show up with a plan. I won't just say, what do you want to do tonight? Where do you want to go? What do you want to eat? I will at least have a plan, and we'll go from there. Every woman I told that to, maybe 4, 5, 6 different women over a few years, all looked at me like just with this look of amazement on their face and said, I've never had a man say anything like that to me before. And then the good ones would always ask, okay, what do you expect of me? Now, that's a good woman, right? And I'd say, tell me the truth, treat me well, make my world beautiful. And when they kind of start looking up at the corner of their eye like that, like, I can do that.
I can do that.
I can do that. And not one woman ever asked me, what do you mean by that? They didn't have to ask. The feminine knows what that means. To treat a man well and make his world beautiful. I think that's a deep urge of the feminine. It's that flow of love and that depth of connection to gift her partner in that way. So that's, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's how I see the polarity existing. But the polarity can switch back and forth. But there has to be a default understood masculine pole. There has to be a default who starts the dance.
Sometimes in a dance you could say, oh, you can lead, but generally
lead me, baby.
But generally you'll default back to you taking the lead on the dance floor. That's just how dances work. Yeah,
that's the default. Doesn't mean you have to do it 100% of the time, but it is the default.
It's the default. So going back to tie the loop on that, then I would say that the part of being the authentic self is to recognize these, let's just call them key pillars of the authentic masculine. And one of those is to understand the characteristics of the masculine, which is to be let's say the doer, the one that creates boundaries, the ones they are instrumental, they are the ones that are, let's say, sometimes going to the extreme. That's also part of the masculine. They go to the extreme, they go to the edge. And once you understand that, and you can actually come from that place, that is your birthright. That is who you are. And then from that place, of course you can adopt different roles and play the different characters and stuff like that. But once you know that, then that is your default, as we're saying. So that from that point of view, that we did answer the question there, and I think that's a And I do, and I think that's really important though, Robert. I think that's a great thing for guys to realize. It's just, they can't just be honest all the time, because they also have to realize there are certain, I don't want to say rules, but there are certain things that are intrinsic to nature, to the masculine and feminine. And I think we should understand those to understand the dance of life, the dance of the sexes, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and you know, maybe an example of that is because the feminine is externally validated. Their sense of worth and value always comes from the outside. The masculine is internally validated through action. You know, if you get up and get the shit done you need to get done, you feel good about yourself. Nobody even has to notice it or say attaboy. But for the feminine, that's why they say, you know, does my ass look fat in these jeans? Or, am I pretty? That's the feminine. And the feminine in us wants that external validation as well. So, for example, being honest from now, the masculine might just be just cut straight to, you're fat, you need to lose some weight, but that's not open-hearted. And that's going to destroy the feminine, because the feminine, their identity is always externalized, right? And so masculine out of love can lead a feminine partner. With my wife and I, like I said, she's a gym rat. She's the one that kind of nags me to get in and work out at the gym. But, if one of us is gaining a little weight, I'll say something like, how about you and I just cut carbs for 3 weeks? And she'll always go, yeah, let's do it. Or, when I first met her, like I said, she worked out, did spin classes, but had a little bit of a belly. She was a poor Mexican woman on a Mexican diet, and it's just mostly crappy carbs. And when I first met her, she had this little bit of a belly, and I would rub on her belly and I'd kiss it, tell her how sexy the belly was. And I wasn't trying to manipulate anything, but I just would pray, because I knew she was a little self-conscious. So I praised the hell out of her belly. And lo and behold, it started disappearing. So there are ways we can be honest in an open-hearted way, especially towards the feminine. If the woman says, do I look fat in this dress? You don't say, you look like a fat cow. You don't. You say, if you need to say something, you say, you have other outfits that are more flattering. And because they already know it doesn't look good on them. They just kind of need to hear you say it. But you can say it in a way that's open-hearted and loving, that doesn't cut to their core of who they are. You can say, you have other outfits that look better.
Yeah, that's why the whole radical honesty thing is great. It's great to get people more in their honesty, but then there is that component that you're talking about, which is about tempering that honesty with empathy, with like softening the edge of the blade.
I only practice radical honesty with my guy friends.
Yeah,
I tell women the truth, but I don't do it in the Brad Blanton kind of way. He's been married at least 5 times, and so apparently he's not working all that well with the women in his life.
It has to be an iron fist and a velvet glove with the feminine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's got to be. I try to use the word open-hearted.
Yeah,
it's got to be open-hearted.
Yeah,
and because always tell the truth. And with my buddies, we practice something that our coach calls being a sacred dick, where basically you're just cutting right through the bullshit with your buddy, but you're doing it from a purely loving, I care about you kind of place. You say something like, hey, you made a commitment to X, Y, and Z. From what you're sharing here, what the fuck happened? Where'd that commitment go? I expect you to keep your commitment. So we got that sacred dick energy where we hold each other accountable. The feminine is not about accountability, right? Yeah. The feminine is about love. And so for the feminine, if you do that with the feminine, hey, wait a minute, you said you weren't going to eat any carbs this week. You're eating a tortilla. You can't do that, right? Yeah. Maybe you just, love on them a little bit and don't eat a tortilla where they just feel a little bit guilty, because they'll go, do you want a tortilla too? No, I'm not going to eat a tortilla right now. But you don't even have to say a word. They're going, oh shit, I ate a tortilla. But you don't have to say a word about it.
Yeah, but that's an art in itself, though. I think that's an art. I mean, maybe there's fodder there for another book. Which is like
how to tell a woman she's fat without saying she's fat.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great title. There we go. That's the next book of the pipeline. So on that, Robert, because I know we've come to the end of the hour. I would if it's okay, just tie the loop on a couple things, and I also want to do a massive shout out to your book as well for our audience here. Let me start off with that, and then if we finish off, I've got one final question to ask you based on the book. So the book is called No More Mr. Nice Guy, and this is actually a kind of a real seminal book within the men's dating community, and for women as well to read. What you've done in there is really, as I said before, it's really accessible, really easy to read. You fill it with lots of case studies and examples of clients that you've worked with and people that you've helped. You know, at the end of each chapter, you're giving loads and loads of practical advice for guys to try, like little homework exercises to try. It's really, really engaging. It's a brilliant book, and I'm sure that it's changed the lives of, as you say, you get many emails from people that you've changed their lives from, and I can see that from reading it. It's brilliant. And actually, one of the things that you said there was actually shocked me, but in a good way, because it was one of those little just truth bombs that just, like, you know, hit me. And actually, I just wanted to ask you about this to finish up. One thing that you mentioned in the book, and I thought this was absolute genius, you talk about the monogamous bond with the mum.
Oh, you're saving that to the very end?
I mean, maybe we need another hour for this one, but I mean, I actually just did a podcast with a guy called Michael Tassarian, and he has a book called The Dragon Mother, and it's all about like how the mother encircles the child and through the Oedipal stage effectively shapes the child throughout the rest of his life.
Sure.
You know, and it's about trying to unshackle yourself from the mum's ties, you know, the mum's chains, if you like, because on some levels she wants to, there is an incestuous, as Freud was saying, incestuous relationship there where the mum's clinging on to the child. So you talk about how the child, I guess, picks up on that and actually creates this monogamous bond with the mother. It's saying that, you know, I'll be with you, mother, forever. You know, I'll be the one that stays with you. I'm your lover. And actually that ties in with the idea that when the father goes away and the father's sort of busy working or he's quite unavailable, sometimes the mother even sort of starts dropping in hints that the father's not too great. So it also starts to create a lot of, you know, the child.
My mother raised me and told me as a child that I'm raising you and your brother to be different from your father.
Right.
She told me that. She, bless her heart, apologized for that many, many years later. She said that was wrong.
But we so call that in. So we start to see men as the problem in the kind of the dynamic of our parents, and then we start to
have to rescue the women.
And we have to rescue the women, and we're brought up with women, brought up with our mums, and we go to infant school, and then we're brought up by the female teachers there. But one of the things I thought was just this was a real truth bomb when you said the monogamous bond with the mother, and it can lead to things like sexual dysfunction. And I just thought, oh my God, because it's almost like cheating on your mother when you're. Is that the fundamentals of what you were hitting on there?
It is, and man, yeah, as you said, we're at the end here. We could do a whole podcast.
Yeah.
The monogamous to mom question is the one that I most get when guys say, you know, you say something in your book that I don't quite understand. It's almost always that. Yeah. And maybe because I didn't maybe even completely understand it at the time, and because it takes a lot of different manifestations as well. And you're right, Freud wrote about it. Robert Bly wrote. Iron John is really all about that. Is stealing, you know, the key
from under the pillow.
Pillow. Yeah, it's all about that. And you know, in healthy family systems, every little boy, I think, does go through a process of loving and wanting to possess their mother, right? And if mother can nurture the child and have good boundaries, the child can go all the way through that. And if the child has a good relationship with father, then around age 4 or 5, he starts identifying more with father and less with mother. And then I tell moms, all you really need to be for your son after about that 3, 4, 5 years old is a lap. He can come back, crawl in your lap, get a kiss, get a hug, and gets back down again. But if you hang on too tightly, it's going to mess him up. Or if you're never there when he comes back, it'll mess him up. And then if dad begins to form this masculine relationship with son, he can lead him out into the masculine world, initiate him into the scary world of the masculine, and he can have good, healthy relationships with women. 2 really good books that maybe most of your listeners probably have seen at least one of the movies, both by Chuck Palahniuk. Fight Club is one of them. And there's a scene in there, and it's in they do a good job of working off the book, where the Brad Pitt, Edward Norton character bathtub next to the bathtubs, and the Edward Norton character says, you know, I need to find a woman, I need to find a girlfriend. And the Brad Pitt character says something like, we're a generation of men raised by women, and I don't think a woman's the answer we're looking for. Now, in the other book, and they made a movie of it, but it wasn't as good, called Choke by Chuck Palahniuk. There's this guy, he actually goes to 12-step meetings as a sponsor and has sex with women in the bathrooms and then signs off that they showed up for their 12-step meeting. There's a lot of paradoxes in it. And his mother is mentally ill. And he grew up without a father, and she drug him all over the country and told him all kinds of stories and said that, you know, he was born of immaculate conception. He knows his mother's mentally ill, and he loves his mother, right? And he knows that relationship has fucked him up, right? He's aware of that. And there's a line in that book that says something like, when your mother is your first spouse, every other woman feels like a mistress. And that's the point that, like, made that you said, that when you had to go be there for mother and be her good little man, be her surrogate partner, be her companion, you either had to deal with your own inner anxiety of the sexual desire you had for mother, and usually you have to put a lid on it, on any kind of sexual desire in some way, and hide that from the good women, i.e. it becomes a Madonna whore thing, and you push it underground. And I'm convinced that's why so many men turn to porn. They're more comfortable with hookers and escorts, because that sexual energy goes underground to the, quote, bad women, because you can't, you know, it was too scary to have a sexual impulse towards the good woman mother. You had to hide it. You had to be the good man. And again, doing our shadow work, our dark side work, involves bringing up that dark energy, and the fact that probably every little boy did have lustful feelings for his mother. But most of us felt like we had to repress it, mainly because if mom didn't have good boundaries with us, we thought we were going to go be consumed by her. So, I mean, again, this stuff just manifests in so many ways.
Yeah, and there's great material. I mean, there's a whole, you know, abundance of you know, psychoanalytical data, information on that people can read. But you've really hit the nail on the head in that. And especially when you mention that in the book about how the monogamous bond with the mother can create all these symptoms within a guy's relationship with other women, I just thought I don't know, it was just a really nice little reminder to what's going on, and just the way you wrote it, just a real kind of like ding, you know. And I think that's in summary, that's what I really liked about your book. It's you know, you managed to put things in just the simplest, most succinct form for us to really get the message without going too over the top or trying to put too many words in there. And it's just really, really accessible, a really great read. And I really implore all the listeners to check out if they haven't already. And is there, Robert, is there any other, you mentioned your other book, would you like to mention that as well?
Yeah, Dating Essentials for Men. It's been out about 8 months now, came out in June of 2019. I'm working on another one called Positive Emotional Tension. My goal is to write 10 books in 10 years. I set that goal about 1.5 years ago, and so far I'm on pace. So yeah, go to Amazon, you know, go look for No More Mr. Nice Guy and Dating Essentials for Men. And you mentioned one thing about No More Mr. Nice Guy being popular in the dating community, and it is. It's like, if you go to Amazon, it's like in the top 5 selling books on dating. And I laugh at that, because when I wrote it, I was married, and I had no clue how to date. But the principles in there, especially when it comes to relating to women and being authentic, do resonate well in terms of single guys.
And you didn't realize that when you wrote it?
I had no idea it was going to be like fantastic. A dating bestseller.
No, it's like a Bible. It's like a dating Bible, and you had no idea. I love that.
Yeah, no idea.
And so I also want to say, you know, the way Robert's coming across here, you know, he's a very cool dude. He's very open-hearted. That is the impression you get when you're reading the book. It's that same flavor, that same feeling. And I can assure you, you'll have a good time reading it. So I guess all that's left to be said for the show is thanks, Dr. Robert Glover. We've loved having you on. And I'm sure, well, I hope it'd be nice to get you back on, and we can talk about your other book and your other 10 books.
Yeah, well, each one I'll come on and we'll plug them all. So thank you for the invitation. Great interview. I had a great time.
Thank you. All that's left to be said is thank you, and all the best.